The dust in Gallows Creek didn't just settle. It choked. It tasted of rusted iron and desperate sweat, a flavor I'd grown used to after 3 days in a cage designed for hounds. They didn't even give us names on the block, just numbers pinned to our rags. I was number 7, to the men circling us with yellow teeth and whiskey-warm breath. I wasn't a woman with a past or a soul. I was livestock with a shelf life. The auctioneer's gavel was a heavy thud against my heart, each strike signaling the end of another girl's. Life in the beginning of a nightmare. Look at this one. The auctioneer bellowed, his voice like gravel in a blender. He hooked a finger under my chin, forcing my head up. Clean teeth, strong back, and eyes that still got a bit of fight in them. Do I hear 50? I looked out into the crowd of vultures. They weren't looking at my eyes. They were measuring me for labor or worse. I closed my eyes, praying for a lightning bolt or a sudden heart attack. Anything to skip the next chapter. But then the air in the square shifted. The rowdy murmurs died down like a fire hit by a sudden rain. The heavy, rhythmic clink-clink of spurs echoed against the wooden slats of the stage. A man stepped out of the shadows of the livery stable, his silhouette cutting a jagged line against the setting sun. He wore a duster so caked in trail grit it looked like armor, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low enough to hide everything, but a jawline made of granite. 100, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the dirt like a gunshot. The auctioneer blinked, his greed momentarily fighting his fear. 100? Sir, the bid's only at 60. I don't care, the stranger said, stepping into the light. He had a peacemaker strapped to his hip that looked like it had seen more miles than the devil himself. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the other girls. He just stared at the auctioneer with eyes the color of a winter storm. I'm buying the girl. All of her. Now get the keys. He didn't know my name. He didn't ask for it. He just threw a heavy leather pouch of coin onto the stage. It landed with a thud that sounded like a funeral bell and waited. When the iron collar was unlocked from my neck, I stumbled. I expected a rough hand to grab my arm, a sneer, a demand. Instead, I felt a gloved hand steady me for just a fraction of a second before he turned on his heel. Keep up, was all he said. We walked through the mud of Gallows Creek, past the saloons, where men watched us with envious, dark eyes. I followed him like a ghost, following its executioner. Why had he bought me? Was I to be a cook, a maid, or something far darker in some lonely cabin in the Sierras? My mind raced with every horror story I'd heard on the trail west. But the way he walked, steady, purposeful, never looking back to see if I was trying to run, was confusing. He knew I had nowhere to go. In the Wild West, a lone woman was just prey waiting for a different predator. We reached the edge of town where a massive charcoal-gray stallion stood hitched. He unfastened a bedroll and tossed it to me. Wrap yourself up. The desert gets cold enough to crack bone at night, he muttered, still refusing to look me in the eye. Who are you? I finally whispered, my voice cracking from days of silence. He paused, his hand resting on the pommel of his saddle. For the first time he looked at me. There was no lust in his gaze, only a weariness so deep it felt like it could swallow the world. I'm the man who just spent his last cent on a debt I don't owe. Beyond that, I'm nobody you need to know. He swung into the saddle and reached down, offering a hand. I hesitated. Behind me was the auction block and a slow death. In front of me was a man who looked like death itself, but offered a way out. I took his hand. It was cold, hard, and steady. As we rode out of town, the lights of Gallows Creek fading into a dull orange glow, I realized the auction wasn't the end of my story. It was the prologue. But as the wind began to howl through the cacti, a terrifying thought gripped me. I was free from the cage, but I was now in the shadow of a man the entire territory feared. We rode for hours in a silence so thick you could cut it with a bowie knife. The only sound was the rhythmic thud of the horses' hooves and the occasional howl of a coyote in the distance. He didn't ask me where I came from. He didn't ask how I ended up in that cage. It was as if he already knew the world was a cruel place and didn't need the details of my specific brand of misery. Around midnight, we made camp in a dry wash protected by high red rocks. He moved with a practiced, lethal efficiency, starting a small fire of sagebrush and dried buffalo chips, barely enough to warm a tin of beans, but small enough to keep us hidden. He handed me the first plate. "Eat," he commanded. "Why did you do it?" I asked, holding the warm tin. "You could have bought a dozen horses for what you paid for me. You could have bought a ranch." He leaned back against a rock, his hat tilted forward, shadows dancing across the lower half of his face. "There are things in this world that shouldn't be for sale. Humans are at the top of that list. Besides, I knew the man who was going to bid next. He's a man who likes to hear things scream. I figured I'd rather see my gold in the dirt than see you in his cellar." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. "He'll come for me, won't he? A man like that doesn't like losing." The gunslinger checked the cylinder of his revolver, the metallic click sounding incredibly loud in the stillness. "Let him come. I've been looking for a reason to send him to hell anyway." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a rescue. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. The man who bought me wasn't a hero, he was a hunter, and I was the bait. As the days turned into a week, the dynamic shifted. He taught me how to lead the horse, how to mask our tracks in the rimrock, and how to hold a derringer without shaking. He still didn't ask my name. He called me girl or you. It was a barrier, a way to keep his heart from getting involved in a business that usually ended in blood. But I saw the way his hand hovered over his holster every time a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. I saw the way he stayed awake until dawn, watching the trail we'd left behind. One evening, as we sat by a dying fire near the border of the New Mexico territory, the silence finally broke. "My name is Eleanor," I said. He didn't move for a long time. Then he let out a long, ragged breath. "I didn't want to know that." "Why?" "Because names make people real," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Names make it harder when the lead starts flying. I've buried a lot of names, Elena. I didn't want to bury yours." "You're expecting to die," I stated, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "I'm expecting a fight," he corrected. He stood up, looking toward the dark silhouettes of the mesas. "They're close now. The men from the auction. They've been tracking us since the third day. They don't just want you back. They want the disrespect paid for in skin." He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something human in his eyes. Hope? No, it was more like a grim satisfaction. He reached into his duster and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. He didn't give it to me. He set it on the saddle. "If I don't make it through tomorrow, you take the horse. Inside that book is a map to a mission south of the border. The sisters there will take you in. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything." "I'm not leaving you," I said, the words surprising even me. A week ago, I wanted to run from him. Now, the thought of the desert, without his silent protection, was more terrifying than the men following us. He almost smiled, a ghost of a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "You got grit, Elena, but grit don't stop a Winchester round. You do what I say." The next morning, the sun rose blood red. We were trapped in a box canyon, the only exit, a narrow gap between two towering pillars of sandstone. The gunslinger didn't look worried. He looked ready. He positioned me behind a fallen boulder with the derringer and his spare canteen. "Stay low," he whispered. "No matter what you hear, don't scream." Then he stepped out into the center of the canyon, a lone figure against the vast, uncaring landscape. The dust began to kick up. 5 riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon. At the lead was the man from the auction, the one the gunslinger said liked to hear things scream. He was a bloated, ugly man on a white horse, a contrast that felt like an insult to the light. "You've caused a lot of trouble, bounty hunter," the lead rider yelled, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Give us the girl and the gold you stole, and maybe we'll only take one of your hands." The gunslinger didn't say a word. He didn't to even draw his gun. He just stood there, his duster fluttering in the wind. "I told you," the rider screamed, losing his patience. "Give her up." "Come and take her," the gunslinger replied. The violence was instantaneous. The riders spurred their horses forward, rifles raised. The gunslinger moved with a speed that defied the human eye. His peacemaker barked once, twice, 3 times. 2 riders fell from their saddles before they could even level their sights. He dove behind a rock as a hail of bullets chipped the stone above his head. I watched, heart hammering against my ribs, as the canyon turned into a slaughterhouse. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, acrid and biting. The gunslinger wasn't just defending, he was hunting. He moved through the rocks like a mountain lion, appearing and disappearing, his shots never missing their mark. One by one the men fell, but then a cry of pain. I saw the gunslinger stumble. A bullet had caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The lead rider, the bloated man, saw his chance. He leapt from his horse, a heavy hunting knife in his hand, and charged. I didn't think. I didn't calculate the odds. I crawled out from behind my boulder, the small derringer heavy in my hands. The bloated man was on top of the gunslinger, his knife raised high for a finishing blow. Crack. The derringer kicked back, nearly jumping out of my hand. The bullet caught the man in the thigh. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was enough. He howled, his balance shifting. That split second was all the gunslinger needed. He lunged upward, his own blade flashing in the sun. Silence returned to the canyon, heavier than before. The only sound was the heavy breathing of 2 people who had looked into the abyss and refused to blink. The gunslinger leaned against the canyon wall, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked at the dead man at his feet, then up at me. I was still holding the smoking derringer, my hands shaking so hard I thought I'd drop it. He walked over to me, his steps heavy. He took the gun from my hand and tucked it back into his belt. Then he did something he hadn't done the entire journey. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. You missed the heart, he croaked, a genuine, tired smile finally breaking across his face. But your timing was perfect. You knew they were coming, I said, the adrenaline beginning to fade into exhaustion. You used me to draw them out. I did, he admitted, his voice soft. But I also bought you because I knew you were the only one who wouldn't run when the lead started flying. I needed a partner, Elena, not livestock. He turned and looked toward the horizon, where the trail led toward the Mexican border and the unknown. The mission is still an option, he said. I can take you there, and you'll be safe. You'll have a name and a life where nobody knows you were ever on that block. I looked at him, this nameless ghost of the West, a man made of scars and secrets. I looked at the vast, wild land around us, a place of terrible beauty and absolute freedom. And what about you, I asked. Who's going to watch your back while you're off being nobody? The gunslinger picked up his hat, dusted it off, and settled it firmly on his head. He offered me his hand again. I reckon I've got enough gold left for 2 horses, he said. If you're interested in a job that pays in sunset and survival. I took his hand. I didn't need a mission, and I didn't need to hide. I had a name, a gun, and the best teacher in the territories. We rode out of that canyon not as master and servant, nor as hunter and bait, but as 2 shadows merging into one. The auction had tried to break me, to turn me into a commodity, but it had accidentally forged something else. As we disappeared into the heat haze of the desert, I realized the man who claimed me didn't need to know my name to know my worth. The Wild West was a place where you could be born again in the fire. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in gold and blood, I knew Elena was dead. The woman riding beside the gunslinger. She was someone entirely new, and God help anyone who tried to put a price on her again.